Hey everyone, welcome back. Imagine a story so raw and transformative that it challenges everything you thought you knew about our education system. Today, I'm sharing the incredible journey of a young boy who, despite facing unimaginable cruelty in school, finds hope and empowerment through the love of his family in a community ready for change. Stay tuned, this is a story you won't soon forget. Underscore 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 underscore. Jacob's plea echoed through the halls of Oakwood Elementary every day. "I'm sorry. I'll be good. Please don't lock me in again," he whispered, words that were as heartbreaking as they were desperate. At only 10 years old, Jacob carried not only a backpack but the heavy burden of a learning disability that made every school day a battle. His school, decorated with bright, cheerful posters and seemingly welcoming colors, masked a darker reality behind its walls. Every morning, as Jacob approached the classroom door, his fingers would tremble around the straps of his backpack. The once inviting corridors felt like traps, and the laughter of other children only deepened his sense of isolation. Inside the classroom, the constant hum of shuffling papers and the murmur of voices overwhelmed him, making it nearly impossible for him to concentrate. Despite his keen imagination and a sharp mind that missed nothing, Jacob struggled immensely with tasks that came easily to his peers. Reading aloud or solving problems on the board transformed from simple exercises into monumental challenges, chipping away at his self-esteem with every passing minute. One fateful day, as his teacher, Miss Thompson, started the lesson, Jacob sank into his seat, determined to vanish into the background. He opened his textbook, but the words blurred before his eyes, and his heart pounded with anxiety. As he tried to focus, his thoughts tangled into confusion. The teacher's voice, filled with a mix of frustration and exasperation, barely reached him over the cacophony of his racing mind. "Jacob," Miss Thompson said sharply when he finally raised his hand, "I've already explained this twice. You need to pay attention. We can't have the entire class held back because you refuse to focus." Those words, meant to discipline, instead stung like a lash, leaving him feeling small and misunderstood. The quiet shame that flooded him in that moment was overwhelming. His classmates exchanged puzzled glances, their attention now fixed on him as he sank lower into his seat, every word of disapproval echoing inside his head. After school, as Jacob trudged to the car, his older sister, Sophie, noticed his unusual silence. The spark that once shone brightly in his eyes when talking about school adventures was now replaced by a heavy, desolate look. Over breakfast, Sophie watched in growing alarm as her little brother mechanically pushed his cereal around his bowl, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond the kitchen window. When she tried to coax him into sharing details about his day, his replies were curt and dismissive, leaving a trail of unanswered questions. That very night, unable to sleep, Sophie crept quietly to Jacob's room. As she listened at his door, his muffled voice, laden with fear, repeated the same desperate plea, "Please don't lock me in again. I'll be good. I promise." In that moment, Sophie's heart shattered as the horrifying truth began to take shape. Something was terribly wrong at school, and Jacob was suffering in silence. Determined to be her brother's protector, Sophie vowed to uncover the truth, no matter how deep or painful the investigation would be. The next morning, Sophie watched Jacob walk slowly toward school, his once light-hearted steps now heavy and hesitant. A fierce determination took root in her heart. Today, she decided, she would start investigating. If Jacob couldn't speak up for himself, then she would become his voice. She knew that if the world was going to know what was happening to him, she had to capture every detail, every whispered cruelty. With trembling hands, she carefully attached a tiny recording device inside Jacob's backpack, ensuring that no moment of his day would go undocumented. Inside the classroom that day, Ms. Thompson was already on edge. With a stack of ungraded papers piled high on her desk and an overwhelming sense of responsibility for 30 other students, she felt the pressure of balancing the needs of every child. But among them, Jacob's struggles seemed to weigh even heavier on her. Although she had once been passionate about teaching, years of relentless stress and a lack of proper support had begun to erode her empathy. As she prepared to lead the class in a writing exercise, her eyes settled on Jacob, who was fidgeting restlessly at his desk. Ms. Thompson's patience had worn thin. With a mix of anger and deep-seated frustration, she approached Jacob's desk as his pencil tapped an erratic rhythm on his desk. The classroom, usually filled with chatter, fell silent as everyone sensed the impending tension. "Jacob," she said, her voice laced with irritation, "why haven't you started writing?" Jacob's eyes darted around, desperate for help, and he managed a shaky, I don't understand." But instead of offering assistance, Miss Thompson's tone grew sharper, each word cutting into him like a physical blow. "Everyone else understands. How many times do I have to explain this?" she snapped. With each harsh word, Jacob's courage crumbled further until his hand, clutching the pencil so tightly, finally broke it with a sharp crack that resonated through the silent room. A collective gasp of shock rippled among his classmates. In that chilling moment, Ms. Thompson's frustration spiraled out of control. With a sudden, jarring motion, she grabbed Jacob's arm and, without further explanation, marched him toward a small supply closet at the back of the room. In one swift, heart-wrenching action, she shoved him inside the closet and locked the door behind him. The resounding click of the lock echoed ominously, leaving the classroom frozen in disbelief. Jacob's tiny body pressed against the cold, hard wall of the supply closet as the door closed, plunging him into a suffocating darkness filled with the acrid scent of cleaning supplies and the oppressive weight of isolation. Every second stretched endlessly as he clung to the wall, the muffled sounds of his classmates' stunned whispers filtering through the door. Memories of previous incidents, each one a cruel reminder of his abandonment, flashed before his eyes, intensifying his fear. Inside that cramped space, Jacob's mind raced with despair. The darkness was nearly impenetrable, and he felt utterly alone. His eyes darted around, trying to find a sliver of light or hope, but all he could see were shadows and the looming presence of isolation. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one punctuated by the sound of his own rapid heartbeat. The silence was only broken by the occasional creak of the building and the distant echoes of school life that continued as if nothing had happened. As time ticked by, the overwhelming sense of abandonment deepened, and Jacob's desperate hope that someone would come for him began to fade. His heart sank with every passing minute, and the quiet terror of being forgotten took over. At home that evening, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken dread. At dinner, Jacob sat silently at the table, his untouched plate and vacant stare speaking volumes. Sophie exchanged worried glances with their parents as the conversation stuttered to a halt. Finally, their father broke the silence. "We received an email from your teacher today. Your grades have been slipping, and there were mentions of behavioral issues." His tone was measured, but the pause that followed was pregnant with concern. Sophie's heart pounded as she realized that something far more sinister was unfolding behind those official reports. Gathering her courage, she quietly ventured, "I think there's more going on here than just grades." Her mother's eyes filled with worry. "What do you mean, Sophie?" she asked softly. Before anyone could respond, Jacob's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and betrayal. In a sudden burst of panic, he bolted from the table, leaving his family staring after him in stunned silence. As the shock of his abrupt departure settled in, his parents turned to Sophie, their faces etched with deep concern. "What exactly do you think is happening?" his mother asked, voice trembling slightly. Sophie took a deep breath and replied, "I'm not entirely sure, but I have my suspicions. There's something very wrong with Ms. Thompson. The way Jacob talks about her, or rather, doesn't talk about her, it's as if he's terrified of her. Their father's jaw clenched as he processed her words. We need to get to the bottom of this, he said firmly. First thing tomorrow, I'll call the school to set up a meeting with the principal. That night, while the rest of the house tried to settle into a false calm, Sophie lay awake, haunted by the muffled sounds of her parents' worried conversation downstairs and Jacob's restless movements in his room. With the moon casting long, eerie shadows across her ceiling, a plan began to take shape in her mind. If Jacob was too scared to speak up, then she would gather the evidence on his behalf. Determined to expose the truth and protect her little brother, she meticulously set her plan into motion, knowing that every moment counted. The following day, as Jacob reluctantly prepared to leave for school, Sophie's heart ached at the sight of him. His usual bounce in his step was replaced by a heavy, defeated shuffle. With a forced smile that couldn't mask her worry, Sophie placed the backpack, now secretly containing the tiny recording device, beside him. Have a good day, buddy, she said, her voice unnaturally bright despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. Jacob nodded numbly and stepped out the door, leaving Sophie to watch him disappear around the corner with a mix of hope and fear swirling in her heart. In the classroom, Miss Thompson continued her day with the same impatience and mounting frustration. Her desk, cluttered with stacks of ungraded papers and red pens, was a constant reminder of her inability to keep pace with the diverse needs of her students. Although she had been teaching for over a decade, the demands of her job, compounded by the sheer number of students needing attention, had left her feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. Among these students was Jacob, whose persistent struggles with reading and math were a daily challenge that she neither had the time nor the resources to properly address. During a writing exercise, Ms. Thompson's focus shifted to Jacob, whose hand remained raised, silently pleading for help as he tried to form his letters correctly on the page. Her growing impatience culminated in yet another outburst. "Jacob, why are you still not writing?" she demanded, her tone cold and sharp. The other children continued to work, their quiet concentration contrasting starkly with the rising tension surrounding him. With each word that fell from her lips, the pressure on Jacob mounted until, finally, the pencil in his grasp snapped in two with a resounding crack. The sound reverberated through the silent classroom, eliciting shocked glances from every student present. Seizing the moment, Miss Thompson's frustration overtook her better judgment. "That's it," she shouted, her voice filled with anger and disappointment. Before anyone could react, she reached out, gripping Jacob's arm with surprising force. "If you can't focus here, maybe you need some time alone to think about your actions." With that, she marched him out of the classroom and down the hall to the supply closet, a small, windowless space used for storing extra materials. Without any further explanation, she shoved him inside and locked the door, the final click of the lock echoing in the stunned silence of his classmates. Inside the supply closet, Jacob's world shrank to the size of that cold, confined space. The air was heavy with the scent of cleaning products, and the rough, wooden shelves laden with textbooks and supplies mocked him with their indifference. Each minute felt like an eternity as he pressed his back against the concrete wall, the oppressive darkness and silence amplifying his terror. Memories of past humiliations and neglect flooded back, and every sound, from the creaking of the building to the distant hum of school life, only deepened his isolation. The hope that someone might soon rescue him dimmed with each passing moment, leaving him feeling abandoned and utterly alone. Back at home, dinner that night was a quiet affair, the air thick with unspoken fears. Jacob's silent, withdrawn behavior did not go unnoticed by his family. Their worried glances and hushed conversations spoke of a shared pain that was as raw as it was inexplicable. Later that evening, as the family tried to process the day's events, Sophie couldn't shake the overwhelming need to gather every piece of evidence she had so carefully recorded. With trembling hands, she retrieved the recording device from Jacob's backpack once he had gone to his room. In the quiet solitude of her own space, Sophie plugged in her earphones and pressed play, bracing herself for the heartbreaking truths captured in that single day. The recording began with the mundane sounds of a typical school day, the shuffling of papers, the scrape of chairs on linoleum. But soon, Ms. Thompson's harsh voice cut through the background noise. "Jacob, how many times do I have to explain this? Are you even trying?" Her tone was merciless, and the low, almost inaudible response from Jacob, filled with fear and confusion, told a story of its own. As the recording continued, the damning evidence of Ms. Thompson's abusive behavior unfolded. There were moments of outright mockery, interspersed with long, painful periods where Jacob was left to struggle alone. One particularly brutal exchange sent Sophie's heart racing as she listened to Ms. Thompson's sneering words, "You're disrupting the entire class with your inability to learn. Maybe some time alone will help you understand." Then, the sound of a door creaking open and the final, heart-wrenching click of a lock confirmed what Sophie had long feared. This was the moment when Jacob was forcibly confined to that supply closet, a moment that encapsulated the cruelty of an educator who was supposed to nurture and protect. Every whispered breath of Jacob's terror and every stifled cry for help was recorded, leaving Sophie with undeniable evidence of abuse. In the days that followed, Sophie and her family were determined to act. They arranged a meeting with Principal Reynolds, a seasoned administrator known for his careful approach to school policies. As they sat in his office, the tension was palpable. Sophie's parents, faces lined with worry, listened intently as she presented the recording on her phone. Principal Reynolds' expression shifted from cautious skepticism to shock as the raw, unfiltered audio played. The sound of Ms. Thompson's derisive tone, punctuated by Jacob's quiet sobs and the chilling creak of the supply closet door, filled the room. "This is clear abuse," Jacob's father declared, his voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. "What immediate actions will be taken to protect our son and others?" Principal Reynolds sighed deeply, fingers steepled, and explained that while the school took every allegation seriously, they were bound by strict procedures and protocols. "Ms. Thompson is entitled to due process, and we must conduct a thorough investigation," he stated. But Sophie's frustration was mounting. "You heard the recording," she insisted. "How can she continue teaching after this?" Her mother interjected softly, asking, "What does this investigation entail? How long will it take?" Principal Reynolds outlined a process involving interviews, reviews of past complaints, consultations with the school board, and legal teams. Each step, however, felt like a delay that could potentially leave students like Jacob vulnerable for even longer. The meeting ended in a stalemate, with Sophie's family pushing for immediate action while the principal promised only an expedited investigation and increased classroom observations. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of red tape and bureaucratic procedures bore down on the family. Meanwhile, Sophie, undeterred by the slow pace of change, began transforming the raw audio into a compelling video narrative. She spent hours editing the footage, carefully selecting the most damning moments of Ms. Thompson's cruelty. The final product was a powerful montage set to soft, melancholic music, juxtaposing the stark reality of a child's isolation with the vibrant hope of those who believed in change. With every passing hour, the video began to garner attention. What started as a trickle of views soon turned into a tidal wave of public outcry. Social media exploded with comments demanding justice for Jacob, and the hashtag Justice for Jacob quickly began trending. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a critical issue in the broader discussion on disability rights and educational reform. Local education officials released statements promising further investigations, and parent groups organized protests outside the district office. Sophie's phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications as the video's view count soared into the tens of thousands. Then, one day, a message from the school principal arrived. With trembling fingers, she opened it, unsure of what the response might entail. The message was brief but chilling, a promise of further inquiry mixed with a warning of potential consequences. The video had ignited a firestorm, thrusting the family into the center of a media inferno that threatened to consume them all. As the pressure mounted, a prominent disability rights organization reached out to the family, offering legal support and advocacy. Their lead attorney, a determined woman with an unwavering gaze, assured Sophie, "What you've done is incredibly brave. We'll help you channel this attention into real, lasting change." That conversation was a turning point, a spark of hope in an otherwise dark and overwhelming struggle. However, as the media frenzy grew, so did the counter-narratives. Some voices questioned the authenticity of the recording, while others attempted to defend Ms. Thompson's actions. The online debate was fierce, polarizing the public and intensifying the scrutiny on the school district's practices. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, investigators began to uncover a troubling pattern that went far beyond a single teacher's actions. Classroom observation reports, student complaints, and even parent testimonies revealed systemic failures in the district's support for students with disabilities. Within the school, tensions reached a boiling point. The teachers' union found itself caught between protecting its members' rights and addressing the overwhelming evidence of abuse. Union representatives held tense meetings with administrators, struggling to balance due process with the urgent need to protect vulnerable children. In closed-door sessions, the school board debated the merits of the case, aware that their decision would have far-reaching implications for the future of special education in the district. As the investigation progressed, more damning evidence came to light. Auditors from an external agency began a comprehensive review of the district's special education practices. They discovered not only the abusive behavior of Ms. Thompson but also a broader pattern of neglect, students being denied necessary accommodations, inconsistent implementation of individualized learning plans, and a critical lack of teacher training in inclusive education. Parents who had long harbored concerns finally felt heard, as their past complaints were added to the growing pile of evidence. In a dramatic turn of events, the school board convened an emergency meeting. Under intense public pressure and with the evidence mounting, the board decided to suspend Ms. Thompson immediately pending a full investigation and potential termination. The news spread like wildfire through the community, a vindication for some and a sobering reminder of the long, hidden struggles many children endured. As Ms. Thompson cleared out her desk, her once respected image shattered, leaving behind a stark symbol of the urgent need for reform. In the aftermath of the suspension, the district launched a sweeping audit of its special education programs. External auditors worked tirelessly, turning classrooms into temporary offices as they pored over files and interviewed students, teachers, and parents. Their findings were alarming, uncovering widespread inadequacies and systemic failures that had allowed such abuse to continue unchecked for far too long. The community, now united by a shared sense of outrage and hope, rallied together to demand meaningful change. Over time, the hard work began to bear fruit. A new teacher, Ms. Carter, was introduced to Jacob's class, a warm, compassionate educator who understood the challenges faced by students with learning disabilities. Under Ms. Carter's care, the classroom transformed into a nurturing, inclusive environment. Working closely with the district's special education team, she developed a tailored learning plan for Jacob. In her class, when he struggled with math, a supportive teaching assistant quietly offered guidance without drawing unwanted attention. During reading time, Ms. Carter provided him with a specialized tablet loaded with dyslexia-friendly software, allowing him to finally enjoy a story without the frustration of jumbled letters. As weeks turned into months, a gradual transformation took place in Jacob. The trauma of his past did not vanish overnight, but with consistent support and understanding, he began to flourish. The school counselor, trained in trauma-informed techniques, met with him regularly, helping him process his painful experiences and rebuild his self-esteem. Slowly but surely, Jacob found his voice again. In class discussions and group projects, he began to contribute ideas, his unique perspective adding depth and richness that surprised even him. The true turning point came during a group project presentation. Despite the lingering echoes of his previous trauma, Jacob gathered the courage to stand before his classmates and share his ideas. His voice, initially shaky, grew stronger with every word, and the sincere applause from his peers was a powerful affirmation of his progress. By the end of the school year, Jacob was no longer the withdrawn, terrified boy who had once dreaded each day. His grades improved, his confidence soared, and he even volunteered to help other students who were struggling. Outside the classroom, the ripple effects of these positive changes began to be felt throughout the community. Local educators, once skeptical of sweeping reforms, started to embrace the new inclusive policies with enthusiasm. PTA meetings buzzed with discussions about creating a more supportive environment for all students, and parent groups organized initiatives to ensure that every child, regardless of their challenges, received the help they needed. Jacob's story, once a tale of despair and isolation, became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of perseverance, compassion, and systemic change. One sunny afternoon, as the school year neared its end, Jacob's newfound confidence was put on full display at the annual science fair. Surrounded by curious visitors and proud parents, he confidently guided guests through his exhibit, explaining complex concepts with clarity and enthusiasm. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. A once timid boy now stood before the crowd, brimming with self-assurance and determination. For Jacob, this was not just a personal victory, it was a moment of triumph for every child who had ever felt marginalized or overlooked. As the day drew to a close, Jacob took the stage in the school auditorium. In a moment of raw vulnerability and courage, he recounted his harrowing experiences under Ms. Thompson's abuse, the terror of the supply closet, the crushing weight of isolation, and the long, painful journey to reclaim his voice. But he also spoke passionately about the support he had received from Ms. Carter, the tireless efforts of his family, and the transformative power of a community united in the fight for justice. His words resonated deeply with everyone present, igniting a collective sense of hope and determination to build an educational system that truly embraced every child. Today, as you listen to this story, know that it is not just about one boy's struggle, it's about the broader call for change. It's a reminder that every child deserves to be heard, to be understood, and to be supported. Jacob's journey from fear to empowerment is a powerful example of what can happen when we stand together against injustice and demand accountability from those in positions of authority. As the final chapter of this story unfolds, the legacy of Jacob's resilience continues to inspire others. His journey sparked reforms that have since transformed the school district's approach to special education. Teachers now receive ongoing training in inclusive practices, classrooms are better equipped with adaptive learning tools, and students with disabilities receive individualized support tailored to their unique needs. The once dark and oppressive corridors of Oakwood Elementary have been replaced by vibrant spaces of collaboration, creativity, and hope. In closing, I want to thank you for joining me on this emotional and eye-opening journey. Jacob's story teaches us that change is possible, even in the face of systemic neglect and cruelty. It reminds us that every voice matters and that together, we can create environments where every child has the chance to succeed. If you found this story as moving and inspiring as I did, please take a moment to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Your voice is part of this movement, and together, we can make a difference. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep fighting for what's right. Hey everyone, before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to invite you to join our community by subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and this channel is all about coming together, sharing powerful stories, and sparking meaningful conversations that can lead to real change. If you found today's story as eye-opening and inspiring as I did, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future updates and stories that delve deep into issues that affect us all. This isn't just another channel, it's a space where your opinions and experiences are valued. We're here to explore stories of resilience, courage, and transformation, stories that challenge the status quo and encourage us to think differently about our education system, our communities, and ourselves. By subscribing, you're not only keeping up with the latest content, but you're also becoming part of a community that cares about justice, inclusivity, and empowering every single voice. I also want to hear from you. What did you think about today's story? Did it resonate with you in any way? Maybe you've had a similar experience or seen someone overcome a tough challenge. Your comments are incredibly important because they spark conversations and inspire others who might be facing similar battles. Every comment you leave adds to a growing dialogue, a dialogue where we learn from one another, support one another, and sometimes even take the first step toward making a change. Imagine a place where every comment, every story, and every piece of feedback helps build a better tomorrow. That's the community we're striving to create here. Whether you're passionate about educational reform, inspired by personal stories of triumph over adversity, or simply looking for a safe space to share your thoughts, your feedback makes a difference. Let's build a vibrant, engaged community that stands up for what's right and helps amplify the voices that need to be heard. So, if you're ready to be a part of this journey, go ahead and click that subscribe button. And while you're at it, leave a comment telling us what moved you the most about today's video. Your insights, your stories, and even your questions can help others feel less alone and more understood in their own struggles. Plus, every comment you share is a chance to connect with others who are passionate about these topics, sparking new friendships and ideas that can drive real-world change. Thank you for watching, and for being part of our growing community. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe in the power of storytelling to change lives. I can't wait to read your comments and learn about what matters most to you. Together, we can keep this conversation going, support one another, and make sure every voice is heard. See you in the next video, and until then, keep shining your light and making a difference.